Welcome to the Eye Opener. I'm your host, Michael Lewis. Biden unveiled his budget plan for 2022. While it's unlikely to be approved by Congress, it offers a window of the administration's priorities. 15 states are warning banks that they'll pull assets if they bend to the political pressure. Is there a way to combat cancel culture in finance? Amid renewed interest in finding the virus's origin, the Senate unanimously passes a bill to declassify intelligence on the Wuhan lab. Fulton County filed last-minute obstruction to the ballot examination, which was supposed to happen today. The audit is now delayed. Okay, my friends, let's take a closer look together. This morning, Joe Biden sent Congress a jumbo-sized $6 trillion budget for 2022. If passed, federal spending would reach its highest level since World War II. It just boggles the mind the Biden administration aims to double the proposed budget to twice that of the previous administration. So what's inside? The budget includes a full accounting of previously released plans, the $1.9 trillion pandemic relief bill, which is already rolling out, the $2.3 trillion infrastructure proposal, the $1.8 trillion American Families Plan, and $1.5 trillion in discretionary spending increases. The budget also reveals for the first time how the administration believes inflation, employment, and economic growth would be affected by fully enacting Biden's agenda. Like most presidential budgets, the proposal is basically a wish list of sorts. It's more of a map of Democrats' spending priorities for the next decade. The New York Times obtained an early copy of the document that showed the cost of the programs would lead to America running annual deficits of over $1.3 trillion and debt rising to 117% of the total economic output by 2031. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy called Biden's proposal budget too extreme and too expensive. He said, "That is what everyone has ever warned us about, that your debt becomes so large it's more than 100% of your GDP. This sounds like Venezuela or Cuba. Even Obama's economists tell you this is wrong. So where are Biden's economists?" Yesterday, Republicans unveiled a $928 billion infrastructure counteroffer to Biden. Biden said he'd like to see the GOP come in at least with $1 trillion, and he's willing to keep negotiating. The counteroffer put forward by a group led by GOP Senator Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia looks like this. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said that Biden thanked Senator Capito for the proposal and will follow up after getting additional details. With a narrow Democrat majority in both the House and the Senate, Biden's budget may not become a reality, but it offers a window into the administration's priorities. We all know Biden loves electric vehicles. We can tell from the infrastructure plan he proposed. In April, after touring an electric bus and battery manufacturing plant, Biden said America is falling behind and must boost EV production to surpass China. According to research firm Canalys, automakers in China sold about 1.3 million passenger EVs in 2020. Now that's 4 times higher than what automakers sold in the United States. These numbers aren't too bad if you consider the population size of each country. China's population is about 4 times that of America, but of course Americans are much richer on average. Nonetheless, Biden has proposed spending $174 billion to boost America's EV production. At the same time, the Biden administration plans to source the key metals needed to build electrical vehicles outside of America instead of mining them domestically. If the United States wants to be competitive in the EV market, we should have a complete and secure supply chain for the production and advocate Made in America. The Biden administration's approach differs substantially from that of former President Trump, who preferred boosting domestic mining for a stable supply chain. The plan under consideration entails buying the minerals from overseas markets and making U.S. manufacturers focus on processing raw minerals. While Biden may remain in good faith with the environmentalists and some leftist Democrats in their wish to keep the land intact, he's set to deal a major blow to American miners who will be left out of the job market. But the worst part is, how would you make sure America can acquire the minerals it needs while producing zero? The plan would certainly put America in a dangerous position without a domestic critical mineral supply chain. Panay Athia, CEO of U.S. Rare Earth, said the government cannot make assumptions that foreign producers will sell their minerals to us and not to China. In fact, the CCP has been desperately pursuing acquisitions of rare earth projects all over the place. While Biden is pondering over whether America should mine its own metals, China has come to dominate mineral supply chains and the manufacturing of clean energy technologies. Beijing has effectively used control of these essential materials to corner the market on the production of everything, from solar panels, wind turbines, to lithium-ion batteries, the very heart of the electric vehicle. Of course, the way communists overexploit natural resources should never be followed. You also don't want to rely on the CCP to provide you with materials because you know what they are doing is grossly unethical. Now, today, the U.S. imports nearly 50 key minerals and metals for clean energy technologies. For many of these materials, imports account for more than 30%. If supply chains can't meet skyrocketing demand, the cost of clean energy deployment could be sky high. It also means U.S. manufacturers will find themselves increasingly uncompetitive in the cutthroat global markets. We don't want to see another version of what happened during the pandemic when the CCP threatened to cut off supplies of medical equipment. America needs to secure its jobs and ethical critical mineral and rare earth supply chains. Besides critical minerals, a bigger concern is the Biden administration's obstruction of the fossil fuel industry. On May 25th, 15 Republican state treasurers sent a stern letter to Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, John Kerry. The treasurers warn that they'll pull assets from financial institutions if they buckle under federal pressure to refuse to lend money to the fossil fuel and coal industry. The letter, led by West Virginia Treasurer Riley Moore, expresses concerns over reports that Kerry and other Biden administration members have been privately pressuring U.S. banks to squelch the fossil fuel industry. The treasurers collectively represent more than $600 billion in assets, and their states are home to some of the largest fossil fuel producers in the country. The letter asserts the approaches to deny investment and lending for the natural resources will discriminate against law-abiding energy companies and their employees, impede economic growth, and drive up consumer costs. It will be a submission of the free market to the will of politicians. Today, cancel culture is spiraling out of control in all aspects of society, including finance. The pressure of political correctness is threatening the survival of lawfully operating businesses. Last year, J.P. Morgan Chase declared it would refuse financial services to coal producers. Bank of America started a politically motivated effort to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Republican Senator Kevin Cramer and Representative Andy Barr both pointed out that these decisions are not based on the credit worthiness or financial soundness of the customer. They are driven by open pressure from far-left environmental progressives and liberal activists in power. To combat cancel culture in finance, Cramer and Barr are teaming up in Congress to put the Fair Access Rule into law. The Fair Access Rule was a Trump-era legacy finalized in January. It requires banks to provide financial services on risk-based metrics. Under this rule, covered banks won't be able to inject political or public relation considerations into their lending decisions. They would instead be required to base lending decisions on creditworthiness of the borrower, the way things are supposed to be. Cramer and Barr said Congress has the constitutional authority to make new laws and change existing laws. But there's one law even Congress cannot change. This is the law of supply and demand, which in a free market determines which businesses succeed and which fail, as opposed to the opinions of the cancel culture elite. Now, before we continue, if you like our program, please hit that like button and subscribe. But even more importantly, share this video with one or more of your friends. This is the most powerful way to spread the word. If you want to support Eye Opener, please consider donating to the show or purchase a mug that matters. You can find the links in the description below. Your support is greatly appreciated. Salute. According to a CNN report Tuesday, Biden terminated a State Department probe into the origins of COVID-19 in China that was launched by the Trump administration last fall. The Biden administration has repeatedly said it wants Beijing to be more transparent and wants the WHO to conduct an independent investigation of the virus's origin. The recent shutdown of the probe raised eyebrows. The CNN report says, the existence of the State Department inquiry and its termination this spring by the Biden administration comes to light amid renewed interest in whether the virus could have leaked out of a Wuhan lab with links to the Chinese military. However, things turned again. Just the day after CNN reported the story, the State Department disputed it had shut down the Trump-era inquiry and instead said its work had been completed. On Wednesday, Biden issued a statement saying the U.S. intelligence community will redouble its efforts in the investigation and report back to him in 90 days. If the previous inquiry was completed, why do we need to double down the efforts for another investigation? Regardless, everyone now wants to know what's been found. On Wednesday night, Senator Josh Hawley brought a new bill to the Senate floor that requires the administration and the Director of National Intelligence to declassify information within 90 days regarding the origins of the CCP virus. The Senate passed the measure unanimously.
We're here tonight for a very simple reason with a very simple proposition, that the American people deserve to know about the origins of COVID-19. They deserve to know how this terrible pandemic that has ravaged the globe and our country, how it got started, and what China's role was in starting it. Now, we've seen a parade of government officials speculate about the origins in one place or another, and there's increasing speculation and indeed increasing numbers of statements from government officials saying that perhaps this virus originated in a Chinese lab, in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Well, I think it's time that the American people got to decide for themselves. It's time that they actually got to see the evidence that the United States government has collected on this issue. And that is exactly what the measure that we are introducing here tonight.
Hawley added that the opportunity for Americans to evaluate the evidence for themselves is only the first step. If enacted, the documents to be declassified could contain activities performed by the Wuhan Institute of Virology, coronavirus research, and information about lab researchers who fell ill in the fall of 2019. Dr. Anthony Fauci definitely helped renew interest in finding the virus's origin. The recent discovery that the National Institute of Health, under his direction, funded gain-of-function research of the coronavirus at the Wuhan lab did just that. At the very least, we know the virus came from China. It's also a fact that the CCP has been obsessed with virus research, particularly coronavirus research, for years. Back in 2015, a Chinese book was published discussing man-made coronaviruses as genetic bioweapons. We talked about the story in detail in our May 10th show. I've put the link down below if you haven't seen it. With more evidence linking the CCP virus to the Wuhan lab, Fauci changed his views again. Almost exactly a year ago, in May 2020, Fauci said he was strongly leaning towards the virus not being artificially or deliberately manipulated.
If you look at the evolution of the virus in bats and what's out there now, it's very, very strongly leaning towards this could not have been artificially or deliberately manipulated.
So I wanted to ask, are you still confident that it developed naturally?
No, actually, that's the point that I said. No, I'm not convinced about that. I think that we should continue to investigate what went on in China.
Who would buy what Fauci says after he lied about not funding the gain-of-function research in China? His credibility is shattered. Republicans are now demanding Fauci be fired over flip-flopping statements regarding the pandemic. Representative Warren Davidson introduced legislation to terminate the doctor. Davidson wrote in a statement, "Dr. Fauci represents everything that President Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address. The scientific technical elite steering the country towards their own ends. Americans have had decades of Dr. Fauci's leadership, and he publicly failed to respond appropriately to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is time for him to step aside so that new leadership can follow the science and start reopening America." Representative Guy Reschenthaler said Fauci has been wrong, intentionally deceptive, and inconsistent throughout the entire pandemic. A few examples of Fauci's failures include claiming there was very little risk to Americans in January of 2020, opposing President Trump's China travel ban, then crediting it with saving lives, and wrongly predicting an explosion of cases in Texas after Governor Abbott lifted the state mask mandate. Senator Rand Paul was asked on Real America's Voice, "Do you believe Fauci perjured himself?" Paul's answer was, "Absolutely. He lied to the American people. There is an incentive by people like Dr. Fauci not to reveal anything because he would then be culpable. Because he was in charge of funding this lab, he personally approved it." Another big player in misguiding public opinion during the pandemic also backtracked. On May 26, Facebook announced posts pushing the hypothesis that COVID-19 is man-made will no longer be banned on the platform. Facebook's statement reads, "In light of ongoing investigations into the origin of COVID-19 and in consultation with public health experts, we will no longer remove the claim that COVID-19 is man-made from our apps." However, the social media giant made it clear that Facebook strictly controls what can and cannot be said on the platform. As the statement continues, "We're continuing to work with health experts to keep pace with the evolving nature of the pandemic and regularly update our policies as new facts and trends emerge." In February, Facebook called posts saying or suggesting the virus was man-made false information. So who could determine what's false and what's true about the virus origins when inconclusive investigations are ongoing? Which health experts are big tech consulting? Anthony Fauci? In Georgia, even the Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger's support of ballot examination, Fulton County officials don't want the audit to happen. The county filed a flurry of motions ahead of the meeting scheduled for today in an attempt to obstruct the case. County officials argued the complaint filed by voters should be dismissed because the petitioners failed to serve the county. They also said Fulton County doesn't have final control over elections and petitioners haven't complied with election contest requirements. Judge Brian Amero said the motions must be heard before the plaintiffs get access to the absentee ballots. As a result, Amero canceled today's meeting and proposed a June 21st hearing for the Fulton County officials. The county hasn't filed an order to schedule the hearing. Amero not only granted it, but suggested an alternative date. While Fulton County got time to plan for the hearing, voters also gained time to work on their strategy. Lead petitioner Garland Favorito said it seems like a desperation move. The silver lining is that we now have more time to perfect the changes we had to make in our inspection plan. At the previous hearing last Friday, Amero learned petitioners weren't able to properly examine ballot images because the resolution was too low. He ordered the mailed ballots unsealed and allowed petitioners to be at the ballot storage warehouse in order to observe county workers create higher resolution images. Not surprisingly, Democrat Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts condemned the efforts to examine the ballots. Pitts said, "It's outrageous that Fulton County continues to be a target of those who cannot accept the results from last year's election." Pitts seemed to suggest people's concerns should fade away with time. Well, they don't, because the concerns have never been properly addressed. People want to know the truth. And that's it for today, my friends. Check out this playlist right here for more eye-opening content. You can join me on the Eye Opener Telegram chat room and follow me on Newmaker, Gab, and Parler. Don't forget, please sign up to our email list so that we can stay in contact with each other. I'd like to thank you all, and I'll see you next time.